that. We're live on Facebook too. So Linda and Denise, welcome. How is your Chanukah so far?
Baruch Hashem, good. Thank you. I hope yours is very good.
All right, mine is Baruch Hashem, wonderful. Okay, where am I getting some feedback here? Give me a second. I could make sure. Okay, good. Okay. Welcome, everybody. Afreilcha Chanukah. A happy Chanukah. Should be an illuminated one, a joyous one. And today Amen is right. And today we're going to learn a little about Chanukah, and hopefully that will add to our joy, to our celebration, and make it more meaningful. I have a question. Who can quickly name me 5 of your more recent achievements? Don't all rush now. I see the humility coming forward. Don't be so humble. Tell me some of your achievements. Some of your recent achievements.
Completing a cycle of Tanya.
Oh, that's a great achievement. Completing the cycle of Tanya. Go ahead. What else? Ova.
I did a Shabbat without any technology, which is not a common thing for me.
That's a great achievement. Wow. Okay. Anybody else something to share?
I just finished a paper for school.
Great.
Months and months.
Oh, it took you months. Oh boy. All right. So then that truly is
a great achievement.
Right. What else?
Good one.
Who else? I'm listening. So
I studied Tanya.
Okay. So there can be a tendency that we downplay achievements. That's part of human nature. Now, is that because of our humility? Or is it for some other reasons? So I hope to try to discover what is it that sometimes doesn't allow us to celebrate our achievements. Should they be celebrated or should they be downplayed out of humility? Or if it's not humility, is it some other thing that is causing us to downplay or not celebrate, the lack of celebration, that we have sometimes the resistance of celebrating? Why am I talking about this? Is because it's Chanukah. Chanukah is a time to celebrate. So let's understand the celebration of Chanukah. Now, we're all familiar with the story, but just briefly. In the 2nd century before the Common Era, the Syrian Greeks wanted to supplant Jewish culture, Torah and mitzvahs, with Greek culture. They wanted Jews to accept their ways, their path, not the ways of Torah and mitzvahs, not the ways of God. So as we know the story, Yud Maccabee led a small band of Jews who revolted. First, it was very small revolts, and then ultimately it led to greater increase of soldiers, Greek Syrian soldiers, that came to battle, and the Jews won the battle too. They drove the Greeks out of the land. They claimed the temple back, rededicated it, and and that's one of the names of Chanukah, means to dedicate. And here's a rededication. And as we all know, they sought some pure olive oil to kindle the menorah, to begin the daily lighting of the menorah. And they only had 1 flask of shemen of oil, which of course miraculously lasted for 8 days. So what is particular about celebrating Hanukkah? Is it the military victory, banishing the Syrian Greeks, retaking the temple and dedicating it? Or is it this 1 flask of oil that was found and a miracle happened with it? Is it this one? Is it that one? Or is it both? So let's take a look at some Jewish text. A moment. Okay, we'll share the screen. All right, can anybody see the small print? All right. One moment. I'm going to just stop that for a second and get this. I don't know what happened there. But I lost it. My apologies. Welcome, Andrew. Okay. All right, let's go back here. Okay. You have it in front of you. Okay. The Gemara says, "My Chanukah, what is Chanukah?" The sages taught. This is from the Talmud tractate Shabbos. On the 25th of Kislev, there are 8 days of Chanukah. One may not eulogize on them, one may not fast on them, because when the Greeks entered the sanctuary, they defiled all the oil that was in the sanctuary. When the Chashmonai monarchy overcame them and emerged victorious, they searched and found only 1 jug of oil, with the high priest's seal remaining. There was sufficient oil there to light the menorah for only 1 day. A miracle occurred, and they lit from the 1 jug for 8 days. The next year, the sages instituted those days and made them holidays with the recitation of Hallel and Thanksgiving. So the Talmud is clearly emphasizing the miracle of the oil. Hardly a mention about the war, only in passing that the Maccabees, overtook the Holy Temple from the enemies. Nothing else. So the question is, what is the Talmud? What does it mean over here that it doesn't refer to the battle and the victory? Seemingly that's an important event. As a matter of fact, you can only light the menorah in the Holy Temple, and the miracle could only happen if there was first the victory over the Syrian Greeks. So why is there no mention in the Talmud with this? And according to Rashi, you might say, well, maybe it's only referring to some aspect of Hanukkah, a certain component of Hanukkah, but not the complete context of the story. But if we see Rashi in text 1b, Rashi says, "My Chanukah," what is Chanukah? Meaning, on account of which miracle did they establish the holiday? According to Rashi, he's understanding the Talmud, the Gemara, and the sages, that when it's asking what is Chanukah, it's asking, why are we celebrating this holiday? And very clearly, why? Because of the miracle of the oil, not because of the battle that was won. The Rambam Maimonides seems to differ, though. He does make mention of the military victory and actually makes it as an equal component. As we see in text number 2a in the Mishnah Torah, he says the following: in the Second Temple era, the Greek kingdom issued decrees against the Jewish people, attempting to nullify their faith and refusing to allow them to observe the Torah and its commandments. They extended their hands against their property and their daughters. They entered the sanctuary, wrought havoc within, and made the sacred impure. The Jews suffered great difficulties, for they oppressed them greatly until the God of our ancestors had mercy upon them, delivered them from their hands, and saved them. The sons of the Hashmonoim, the high priests, overcame, slew them, and saved the Jews from their hand. They appointed a king from the priests, and somebody returned to Israel for more than 200 years until the destruction of the Second Temple. Now, we have to understand, this is in Maimonides' teachings of Mishnah Torah. Mishnah Torah is halacha. It is a very concise teachings of the law that doesn't even have the reasons or the proofs for the particular observances, because Maimonides wanted to keep the teachings very precise, that everybody could get an overview of the teachings without it getting bogged down with the reasoning behind it. So that's how concise it is. Parenthetically, there were many sages in his day that took issue with this, because this is not the Jewish way. You always have to prove your point. Where are you taking it from? It can't be just seemingly that this is your perspective on things. It needs to come from some previous teachings, text, or legal adjudication. But the point I'm bringing out for over here is that he goes in for a very lengthy explanation of what happened historically, which is not part of a legal work. Why does he do it? Because it's important for us to understand all of that, because that's part of what makes the holiday. He's describing the oppression in order that we can appreciate the victory, and therefore we celebrate that victory. And then he addresses only in the halacha afterwards, in the law afterwards, in a separate paragraph. He says, and 2b continues, when the Jews overcame their enemies, and destroyed them, they entered the sanctuary. This was on the 25th of Kislev. They could not find any pure oil in the sanctuary except for one single jug. It contained enough oil to burn for merely one day. They lit it and arranged the candles from it for 8 days until they could crush olives and produce pure oil, because that process would take 8 days. So each paragraph is describing two components to the holiday, and therefore this is how the Rambam looks at it. Both things are integral to the holiday, and therefore he concludes in the next halacha in 2c. He says, accordingly, the sages of that generation ordained that these 8 days, which begin with the 25th of Kislev, should be commemorated to be days of happiness and praise of God. Candles should be lit in the evening at the entrance of the houses on each and every one of these 8 nights to publicize and reveal the miracle. These days are also called Chanukah. It is forbidden to eulogize and fast on them, as on the days of Purim. Lighting the candles on these days is a rabbinic mitzvah, like reading of the Megillah on Purim. So what do we have over here? According to the Rambam, he presents 3 segments in Jewish law. One is the oppression of the Greeks and the subsequent salvation by God Almighty through the Hashmonoim. And then the second point is the miraculous incident with the oil that lasted 8 days. And finally, there is the holiday that needs to be celebrated in a particular fashion. Okay, so we see Rashi's opinion, we see the Rambam's. Now, first question. Rambam is after the Talmud. The Talmud takes precedence over Maimonides' teachings. Maimonides seems to be a complete contradiction. It seems to be a complete contradiction to what the Talmud says. The Talmud makes no mention of the battle, and yet he does. Why is that? Why is he seemingly contradicting the Talmud? And of course, since he can't, there must be a way that Maimonides Rambam is learning the Talmud, that it doesn't mean the way Rashi understands it. This is the reason for the holiday. Conversely, we have a question on the Talmud. Seemingly, the military victory over good over evil, the Jews over their enemies, who oppress them terribly, is an important factor in the holiday. Why wouldn't this be celebrated? Rambam brings it in law, but it doesn't seem to be something that the Talmud is suggesting. Now, both agree, Rashi and the Rambam, they both agree to every detail of the historical event. So it's not a question about the history here. That's not an issue. That's not an issue. The history is not the issue here at hand, right? So according to both, of course you have to light the menorah and you have to recite Hallel and you need to praise and thank God for the miracles, right? The question is only this element of the military victory, that this is a component that's, again, Rashi says, omits based on what the Talmud seems to suggest. And the Rambam is adding that element. So what is the real debate here? What is going on? So we need to, the distinction between celebrating the miracle of oil versus the military, which the military victory is based on food. What does that mean? It means as follows. There's a halachic debate about Chanukah. Should you celebrate the holiday with any food? Is it something to be celebrated with food or not? So, celebrating lighting a menorah, no question about it, because that is about the miracle of the oil. Whereas marking the military victory, it would be connected with food. Let me explain. The oil, and lighting a menorah, it's a physical action of doing a mitzvah, but yet, as the Talmud says, does God need light? Does the temple need light? No, this is light to illuminate the light of godliness to the world. It's a physical light, but it's really an abstract light about the spirit of the Jewish people, that we are to be an illumination to the entire world, right? And furthermore, the fact that we didn't have enough light, and there was a miracle that occurred, that brings out the idea of a transcendence of God's presence through a miracle. Again, something of a spiritual nature. So everything is, one thing mirrors the other. The fact that this is a spiritual, transcendent event that occurred, the miracle with the oil. So how do we celebrate it? In a form of transcendence, a form of spirit. We light menorah. We light the menorah that it should, as the previous Rebbe says, when you look at the flames, you should be able to see the story that it's telling us. The flames are talking to us. They're telling us a story. They're telling us a story actually of our soul, which we'll get into maybe a little more later. But it's telling us a story. That's the point. And a something of the spirit. military victory is, of course, what is the military victory? Is a physical thing. In other words, there was an oppression against the Jewish people. And as a result of that oppression, the physical battle allowed us to be liberated from our oppressors. And now that we could be in control of our own destiny, right? Similar to Purim, where Haman wanted to destroy the Jewish people. So here also, there's a similarity over here. So let's take a look. Of these ideas we just mentioned. In text 3.8, Rabbi Meir of Rottenburg would say that the many feasts some stage during the days of Hanukkah are only optional. There's no mitzvah to serve a special Hanukkah meal since the holiday was not established as one of feasting and drinking, but rather one of thanksgiving and praise alone. So what is he saying? Thanksgiving and praise, because it's primarily about the oil, which is a transcendent spiritual idea. So therefore we express it through a transcendence of spirit and thanksgiving and praise to God, right? However, if we follow the Rambam's view, right, which equally celebrates the transcendent spiritual nature of the holiday, but also that there's something physical about it, like Purim. So as we see in text number 3b, as a matter of law, I tend to disagree with Rabbi Meir of Rottenburg, in as much as the custom of eating festive meals on Hanukkah is already widespread and has been supported by great rabbis of previous generations. The Marshal also writes that the Rambam implies as such by describing Hanukkah as being days of joy. Rav Shalom of Austria writes explicitly that on Hanukkah one should be joyous and partake in festive meals. So it seems, so according to Rambam, as opposed to Rashi, who says it's only a spiritual event of the miracle of the oil, so we celebrate it in that spiritual manner. According to Rambam, that it also has the military victory, so therefore we have to make festive meals, right? Is that clear? Great. So we still need, though, to understand the Rambam vis-a-vis the Talmud. Seemingly, it's a contradiction. So the way that we can explain the Rambam is as follows. The Gemara is asking, my Hanukkah, what is Hanukkah? Not what is the essence of Hanukkah. What is it about Hanukkah that is different that we celebrate it for 8 days? Purim, we only celebrate for 1 day. Why are we celebrating Hanukkah for 8 days? In other words, there's a given over here that you're going to celebrate because of the military victory, just as we celebrate Purim, a military victory. But there's something different about Hanukkah. It's being celebrated 8 days. Oh, 8 days, that is for the miracle of the oil. Yet, and that's the question of Hanukkah. Like, what is unique about Hanukkah? What is different about Hanukkah? That it is an 8-day celebration rather than a 1-day celebration. In other words, because there's another element to Hanukkah. There's the miracle of the oil. Purim didn't have that, so it's a 1-day celebration. If there wasn't that, we would only have Hanukkah's a 1-day celebration. That's what is how we can understand the Rambam. So it's not a contradiction then in the teachings of the Talmud. It's just a different way to look at the Talmud. Any questions? Clarity? So I have a question for you. I want you to complete this sentence for me. I know now that. Let me repeat the question. I know now something that I didn't know before. I know now that. What do you know? Who can complete the sentence for me? Anybody?
We celebrate military victories with food.
Okay, I know now that we celebrate the military victories with food. Okay, anybody else want to chime in on that? I know now that.
It was the spiritual victory of opposing the Hellenistic Greeks as to the idea that they didn't necessarily want to kill us. They didn't understand that we did things because God said so. That's really what they were attacking. So when they
Right.
went in and destroyed all the oil, it was just because it's oil, it had the priests on it. That's really what they were attacking. And so that's what we defeated. Spirituality won out.
Okay, excellent. Who else can share? I know now that. Okay, I'm waiting. Don't be bashful. The worst you
Well,
can do,
That
the worst you can do
Chanukah
is
is
make a mistake.
that Chanukah is 8 days. It's
You knew that.
celebrated for
No,
8,
you knew that before, though.
but because of the miracle of the oil.
You knew that before that, and you knew that too before. You have to be more nuanced in what you're saying. You're correct. You're not saying what you're not saying anything wrong, but you knew that. You didn't need me for that.
That there were differences between Rambam and Rashi, or
Okay,
I-
excellent.
what
Right.
was about the holiday.
So and now you know that. What is that difference?
Okay, that Rashi talked about that the meal was not important, whereas Rambam talked that the meal is important.
Excellent. Okay. Although they didn't, Rashi did not talk about that to be quite, Talmudic about. He didn't say that, right? I know now that you could look at a piece of Talmud and understand it in two different ways. The simple way, as Rashi explains it, that what is Hanukkah, what is the essence of the holiday that we celebrate, that's the way he understands the Talmud. I know now that the Rambam looks at that piece of Talmud and he sees it differently. He says, not why are we celebrating the essence of the holiday, but why is a holiday lasting for 8 days? That's unique. I know now that. Okay. Sarah Malka, was good what you said, but
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I'm putting him out Talmudic Kak, and I'm not can't let a nuance be be missed.
Yeah. Well, thank you. That was helpful.
Why am I saying this? Because I want to make sure that you know now that you learned something and that you don't walk away, that you were inspired, but you don't know now what. That's very important. Okay. I'm going to be trying to do that more often. So that way, and that should not frighten you. That should actually, you should be embracing it because it'll help the process of learning. Okay. So practically speaking, when it comes to festive meals, right? So now we have the argument, right? But when it comes to festive meals on Hanukkah, the accepted practice is that it's somewhere between not an official obligation, like Purim. Purim, you gotta make a motzi, you gotta wash, you need a Sudas Purim. It's one of the 4 things that you gotta do on Purim, right? So it's not that, but yet it is also accepted that it is something about increasing, festive meal in order to bring family and friends together, especially in these difficult times, to celebrate, to add to the celebration. So as, look at that. We got some latkes on the screen. As they say, better on the screen than on my thighs. All right, so the Ramah says in text number 4, the many meals which we add on these days are voluntary meals, since the sages did not establish them as days of feasting and joy. The Ramah, some say there is somewhat a mitzvah to add meals because the altar was rededicated during those days. The prevailing custom is to recite hymns and songs of praise during the Chanukah feast, and then they are in any case considered mitzvah meals. We Jews, the old story, really kind of started with this and just closed the book, very early. It says, what happened? They oppressed us. We fought back. We won. Let's eat, right? The simple story of the Jewish people. And here we're going around this whole, Talmudic debates and everything. So what do we come out? So anyways, there is an idea that we always gather, and when we gather and we praise God through the gathering and we learn Torah in that gathering, so then it becomes, something of importance, right? But according to the opinion of Rashi and others, we still need to understand, why isn't the military victory an important thing to celebrate? Why is it an important thing to celebrate? To be liberated is not an insignificant thing, especially that liberation lasted about 200 years until the fall of the Second Holy Temple in the year 69 by the Romans. And as we mentioned earlier, routing the Greeks out of the land, in particular from the Holy Temple, allowed us to rededicate the Holy Temple. So we need to understand maybe some historical background over here. So the truth is, after the destruction of the first Holy Temple in 423 before the Common Era by the Babylonians rather, until the times of the Greek revolt in the year 140 before the Common Era, we didn't have real control of our destiny. Yes, we had somewhat. We were liberated in the sense that we could live as Jews, but we had the Babylonians over us, we had the Persians, then the Greeks, and eventually the Romans, right? So we lived peacefully under the rule of each empire. If you know the story of Alexander the Greek, without going into great details, that Alexander is a Jewish name because he's named after Alexander the Greek because he came to conquer the world. But when he came to Jerusalem, and he met Shimon, the high priest, Shimon HaTzadik, and he realized that this is the man that has been helping him in his battles, because he always has a vision and a dream, and it was him, always coming to him. So he didn't lay siege on Jerusalem. And therefore, the following year, boys that were born were named Alexander after Alexander the Great. But then came a time that the Greeks wanted to ensnare us with their Greek culture, as Andrew, you mentioned earlier, that we should become Hellenists. And this was escalated by the madman Antiochus IV in 174 before the Common Era, systematically suppressing the Jewish people in belief and practice, to root out a belief in God, studying the divine Torah, and replace it with, the modern day Greek cultural icons. Things became worse because when a small band of Jews said enough is enough, and they fought back, things got escalated to such a degree that there were such harsh decrees that it was forbidden for Jews to worship. They couldn't study Torah. That's why we have the dreidel, right? That's what they played with when they came along, searching out their Torah scrolls. And when they would find it, they would burn them. Jews weren't allowed to keep Shabbos, circumcise a child, and keep kosher laws. All of this was a prohibition under the death penalty. And soldiers would march from village to village to checking out on what the Jews are doing. That's what was happening. To such a degree that Antiochus turned the Holy Temple into a pagan temple. Then came the Maccabees. What is Maccabees? Is an acronym for Mi Kamecha Elim Hashem. Who is like you among the heavenly powers, O God? That was what the Maccabee symbol stood for. And they had a battle cry, and that battle cry was, Mi la Hashem Elai. Who is with Hashem? Come with me. Join me. And they started to revolt. But what were they revolting again? The Syrians, who were a threat to the spiritual well-being of the Jewish people. So they wage a counterattack to reclaim our freedom so we can go back to serving God in peace. This is considered responding to a spiritual assault that we eventually are victorious. So if we look over here, text number 5, Lavush explains, Purim involved the decree by Haman to physically obliterate the Jewish people. As such, it is fitting to celebrate the physical survival of our nation by engaging in physical pleasures of eating and drinking. By contrast, Chanukah is a celebration of the victory of the Jewish spirit over the pressure exerted by the Hellenist culture. The Greeks did not threaten to kill the Jews, but rather issued decrees against the performance of numerous Torah commandments. Antiochus did this as the common practice of conquerors, imposing their faith and culture on their victims, after which all he would do was tax them and nothing more. Therefore, Hanukkah's main focus is spiritual, to give thanks and praise to God who helped us regain our independence, thereby preserving our religious identity. So the view then, which sees that the main celebration is about the miracle of oil rather than the focus on the military victory, is because all we were fighting for is to reclaim our spiritual epicenter, the Holy Temple, and the capability that in our private lives that we could live a life as a Jew. And therefore that is really what the celebration is, Hanukkah. So it's not celebrating the military victory that it doesn't have a regard to, but it's the regard to it is only about regaining our spiritual well-being, our spiritual independence, that we would be able to have our independence to lead a Jewish life. So the Rambam doesn't only argues on the fact that the physical salvation also needs to be taken into account. And this is what the Rebbe explains in text number 6. The argument between the two views of Hanukkah being established for the military victories or only because of the miracle of the oil, is not an argument over fact. All agree that physical oppression began as a result of spiritual suppression. The argument is rather a matter of opinion. Is a joyous holiday warranted for physical redemption, precipitated by religious decrees, or not? So, true that the entire conflict began because of religious persecution. It ended up in a battle, a physical battle, but we can't ignore the fact in the interim, yes, the Jewish people suffered terribly and the Maccabees won and, brought an end to the agony, no question. And therefore, according to the Rambam, you can't ignore that, he says. Therefore, that needs to be celebrated. And that needs to be celebrated, meaning the physical agony that the Jews now had been removed from them. We need to celebrate that. And how do you celebrate that? In a physical way. And therefore, you need to have joy. You need to celebrate by having festive meals. So as we explained, there is, when it comes to the festive meals, not quite an obligation, because most opinions don't hold according to Maimonides. Later day opinion, halachic jurisdiction does not say that it is an obligation, but they say nonetheless it is a good time to bring family and friends together and to bring a celebration. Okay. So I know now that this last section, what did this last section teach us? I know now that, who can finish off this sentence for me? Welcome, Paula.
Hello, thank you.
So who's going to finish the sentence for me? Andrew.
Well, we have both. I mean, we understand the spiritual aspects of the holiday, which was the fact that we are practicing and following precepts because of God, unlike the Hellenists that wanted us to change. On the other hand, it precipitated getting the yoke of the Persians and the Greeks off our necks as well. So you do both.
Okay, good. But what was the point that we just brought out? I know now that when it comes to something of a spiritual nature, I celebrate in a spiritual way. When it comes to a military victory, if it is about the physical reality of the Jewish people, as was the case of Purim and Haman's decree, was about killing Jews, period. It wasn't about making Jews Persian, that they should accept the common culture, not at all. It's about destroying, annihilating the Jewish people. That's what it was about. So therefore, I know now that when it comes to a military victory that was battled in order to save and preserve the physical reality of the Jews, then I have to now celebrate that military victory, i.e. Purim, in a physical manner of celebration. So we have a Purim Suda. You also give gifts of Shalach Manos, Mishloach Manot, Yishla, and so on. Now, where Chanukah is got the distinction, there is a military victory. There is a battle that's being fought. And there was oppression against the Jews. However, the oppression began as a form to not annihilate the Jew, but in order to spiritually transform them from Jewish-based belief and observance to now becoming part of Greek culture. So yes, there is a battle, and this is the nuance over here, right? So according to the Rambam, that battle that got our presses off our back, so that needs to be celebrated. But yet, since it really was predicated on not about the oppression of physical reality, but the oppression of, give me the word, spirit. Right? It's an oppression of spirit. That's not what Haman and Purim was. It's an oppression of spirit. So since that's what it's really predicated on, so therefore the common halachic opinion, not like Maimonides, like Rambam, is therefore the holiday is celebrated in a spiritual manner, thanking God for taking away that spiritual oppression, that we could rededicate ourselves in, and especially in particularly through the miracle of the oil. Okay, is that clear? You guys are great. All right. So I want to go back to a discussion we had at the beginning. And when I asked you if you could recount 5 great achievements of late, and a few of you gave me 1. Didn't hear 5, mind you. Okay. So I asked the question, what is it about us, me included, all of us, that sometimes we're hesitant to celebrate achievements? Although we know that when we celebrate even small milestones of achievement, that is an impetus, that is an inspiration, that gives us strength to continue in whatever we need to, battle and work on and achieve to go, the whole 9 yards. So sometimes it's good to celebrate not when you made the 9 yards, maybe you just made a yard. But we're not necessarily so comfortable with that. Why would that be? Why would we be in a culture that might not celebrate achievements? Now, from a Jewish perspective, we do celebrate achievements. You studied a tractate in the Talmud, you make a siyum, right? You finished, you studied something, celebrate it. So does anybody have any thoughts on that? Why we might have a difficulty in celebrating an achievement besides humility, which I would suggest is not necessarily the overriding reason. Anybody?
I have two thoughts. I don't know if I can explain the second one the way I'm thinking it, but the first one is the ayin hara. The second one is we may think we're doing it for like good motives, but if we're celebrating an achievement, it may come across to somebody else, I don't know, as materialistic, worldly, even though,
Yeah, okay, or self-indulgent.
right. Even though inside we may have what we think are
Right.
good.
Okay. So, very good. Thank you, Sarah Malka. Anybody else? Any other thoughts?
Well, that it's not good enough. It might be a step in the direction, but you're heading for something else. And so you feel like it might be premature to celebrate because you're not quite where you're trying to get to.
Okay. But if you do celebrate that, wouldn't that give you the impetus and the strength and the courage to move forward? Because, there is a sense of movement forward, a sense of achievement and so on. Wouldn't that help?
Yeah, I mean, when I'm reminded that, yes, that is, you're heading in the right direction.
Okay.
Keep
good.
going.
Okay, excellent. Thank you for sharing. Okay, so, sorry, someone else had some, Andrew?
You don't want to give yourself any kind of horrors, especially if the belief is that it's all through God anyway, that whatever has happened, so to speak. It might be good, and if it came from God, but then again, we take the first step forward and we try to do the best we can, but sometimes it might be out of our hands if under that perspective. So you don't want to give yourself any kind of horrors along the way.
All right, so this is something that Sarah Malka mentioned also, right? That, in other words, given ayin hara, in other words, you're giving yourself a pat on the back, so to speak, that might lead to negative forces that look upon it and maybe it's not such a great achievement as you think it is. And okay, very good.
And actually,
So there's another, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, I think Andrew really touched upon it because it's all with God's help. And hope, as long as we're doing things like what his will would be, it's with his help.
So very true. It is definitely with God's help, and therefore not necessarily, are we to take the credit. So can it be that you can celebrate it and not be so, self, full of yourself, shall we say, and still celebrate the achievement and recognize that it's really God who gave you the capability that you could achieve. So let me suggest the following. Human nature is, and the human condition is, that we kind of define ourselves by our actions. What does that mean? So if I did good, I'm good. If I do bad, I'm not. The opposite, right? So if I achieve something, oh, then I'm special. And if I don't achieve, then oh. So from that perspective, we might be uncomfortable because the achievement is sort of relegated or defining me. And that's something that we may not be comfortable with. And rightfully so, because that's actually a wrong perspective. The achievements are not defining you. You are a soul that's beyond that. You are much deeper, more profound individual than that. And what's happening is that, as we learn in Tanya, we have two forces in us, forces of a godly soul and an animal soul, that are battling over me to be victorious, to allow my thought, speech, and action to be of a godly nature, or battling on the other side is of klipa, of negativity, of, and that is the battle. That is our function here, is to engage in a battle. That battle doesn't define me, though. That's what I'm here to engage in, though. So the success or failure isn't defining me. It isn't me. So my failure doesn't define me. So if I failed and didn't do right, if it defines me, then I'm an oisvarf. I'm no good Nick. And therefore what happens? I now need to feel good about myself. So I go and, look for some comfort food. I look for some something to watch some sitcom, so I can not feel bad about myself and can just laugh. Because what I've done is defining me. So on the other hand, when I've accomplished and I'm successful with something, that's not defining me. That's not defining who I am. I'm greater than my success. I've got a godly soul, a part of God. That's greater than the success itself. My function here is to wage that battle and to be successful, right? And every encounter that we battle, right, we can't be complacent. We need to wage the war of negative forces inside of us, of an animal soul, of an evil inclination, right? And the evil inclination is very, very shrewd in how to manipulate us and to make us feel that when you failed, and you're no good Nick. Or even if you succeed, you succeeded. Rather, look at your failure and your success as what you were created to do, but it's not defining you. So now when you will celebrate a success, it's not defining you. That's what you were created for. So you're recognizing the success, but you're not taking it and becoming haughty by that. Because that's what I was created for. That's what God needs me for. That's what he put me here for. So it's not this pat on the back, oh, look how great I am. I am successful. No, what I did was successful. And that's what God created me for. He needed me to wage that battle to be successful. And so I am. So much so that the Alter Rebbe says, Let's look at some Tanya over here. This is from chapter 27 in Tanya. For this reason, no person should feel depressed, nor should his heart become exceedingly troubled, because though he may be engaged in this conflict for the rest of his days, perhaps this is the very reason why he was created, for the mission to continually overcome evil. This is what you're created for, but this is not what's defining you. This is what your challenge is. Therefore, we should celebrate when we are victorious in that challenge. See how that ever continues in text 9b. Indeed, the rabbis of blessed memory have said, he who has passively abstained from committing a sin receives a reward as though he had performed a mitzvah. Consequently, one ought to rejoice in controlling his thoughts, just as he would when performing an actual mitzvah. Moreover, sadness on the account of propensity to negative thinking only comes from conceit. He simply does not recognize his place. Hence, he is sad at heart because he has not attained the rank of a tzaddik, while the righteous are certainly not troubled by such foolish thoughts. But had he recognized his station, that he is far from the rank of a tzaddik, then he should be happy being a Beinani and not a Rasha for even a single moment. This is the quality of the in-betweener, the Beinani, and their service to subdue the evil impulse and thoughts rising from the heart to the brain, to completely avert the mind therefrom, thrusting the temptation away with both hands, as has been explained before. So the bottom line is, not only should we celebrate victories, we must. Because every time you have a negative thought, what does it mean to celebrate? Here's an interesting idea. What's the celebration, right? The celebration is, this is what you were created for. A negative thought comes to your mind. This many times I mentioned, a negative thought we have towards a loved one, right? Because we had an expectation of them, they didn't fulfill it, so we have a negative thought towards them, right? You pushed away that negative thought. You didn't allow it to be entertained in your mind, to think it. Celebrate it. Well, how? You don't have to take out a l'chaim and say l'chaim to, be joyous about it. That you fulfilled what you were created for. Is that defining you? No. Because you have a soul that's greater than even that challenge. But this is what you were brought into this world for. And therefore, it's not defining who I am, it's defining the function of what God put me in this world. And therefore that is something that each time we overcome something negative within me, there is a reason to be joyous. There is a reason to celebrate. Again, celebrate doesn't mean over here in the sense of, you have to open up a bottle of champagne and so. And this is what Chanukah reminds us. Chanukah was a battle. That battle is in each and every single one of us. Interesting. The Al Nisim prayer says that God delivered us from the mighty into the hands of the weak, the many in the hands of the few, the impure in the hands of the pure, the wicked in the hands of the righteous, and the wanton sinners in the hands of the dedicated to your Torah. Now, that might simply be understood as the oppressive Syrian Greeks, right? But the truth is, in other words, that God gave them over into our hands. We were the few, we were the pure, the righteous, dedicated, and they were the opposite, right? But there is an interpretation that says, no, it's actually not speaking about them. It's speaking about the Hellenized Jews. Because the truth is, these adjectives can't describe the Syrian Greeks, because the concept of purity and impurity is amongst the Jewish people. And what is this telling us? The Hellenized Greek doesn't mean the Greek person, the Hellenized Jew that is not coming to Chabad, not coming to synagogue, and doesn't do mitzvahs. You know what it's talking about? It's talking about me. I have a Hellenized Jew inside of me that wants me to take on the values of the world, whatever it might be, and whatever those values are, everybody on their level. We all have that within us. And what does it mean that we are waging that battle? That battle is a battle within me over the negative force within me of the Hellenized Jew within me, that I have that capacity, right? Is that Hellenized me? Jew me? God forbid. I'm a divine soul that's pure. However, I have a force within me of an animal soul that has that tendency that wants to, find the ways of that world outside, right? And to adapt it into my life. What are we doing? We're waging a battle. The battle's where? Within me. When we recognize that the story of Chanukah is really about me and the inner battle within me, so then you know what? When you win a small little battle, a smile on your face. You davened with a little more, you pushed away that negative thought. You did the mitzvah with a little more enthusiasm. You did a joyous, you did something joyous for another with a little more of a ibigigem, kind of giving yourself over. No, it's okay. That's what I was created for. And I mean, we're talking about to yourself what to say. We're talking about the celebration within you. To say to others, okay, you're right. Maybe you want to be careful. You don't want to be overly, become. But inside of us, recognize that you want to battle. There's something there to celebrate. There's something there to be joyous about. Not a pride of, of being egocentrical, but a joy. Good one over negativity. Light one over darkness. Something good came to the world. There's a greater joy that the Almighty has as a result. Bring a smile to your face. If we say it brings a smile to God, it should bring a smile to us, and we are joyous. That is Chanukah. That is a battle worth celebrating. Let us continue our battle and overcome whatever we need to overcome from within. And then all the battles from without will be simply won over, because it all begins from within. Any questions, any comments? I know now that I'm terrible.
Here.
I'm terrible.
Keep going. Don't give up.
I know
Rabbi,
now that keep moving, don't give up. Excellent. Who? Next. I want to hear next.
yeah, Rabbi.
I know now that.
Well, I'm going to go off a little bit on a tangent rather than respond directly to your question, because I guess my curiosity is that of all the Jewish holidays, Hanukkah seems to be the one that seems to be disseminated to the outside world more than anything else, because, for instance, the menorah lightings have become very popular, and of course that was certainly a very much of a pet project among Chabad last 30 years. We don't disseminate, say, Purim celebrations, Passover celebrations, but we do Hanukkah. So I'm just wondering how that fits into the context of what we just talked about.
Excellent. So the menorah is, as it says, it should be the Pesach Beis Bachutz. It's from your door, from leading to the outside. The menorah is to illuminate the outside world. We light the menorah when it's dark. When it's dark, it's supposed to be illuminating the world, as opposed to Hanukkah. Shabbos lights. We start when it's still daytime. So the idea is to illuminate the darkness of the world, absolutely. But where does the darkness of the world begin? In my world. Yes, we now bring it forward, and we're not satisfied with myself. And that's the uniqueness of Hanukkah, is that we want to bring that illumination of the darkness that everybody needs to wage a battle in their lives, right? And that everybody should illuminate their lives with the lights of the menorah. Absolutely. That being said, though, it is about, take back the darkness. It is about illuminating the dark world, and that dark world begins in, so to speak, in me, in the sense that we all have our own darkness, and by illuminating that, we do that for we can then bring that to the world. So it's not a contradiction. It's absolutely right. The idea of Chanukah to bring that celebration to others. Now, we live in a world today that people don't necessarily look inside, and they're might be more external, not necessarily so looking inside. So, the message that it looks like you light menorah and have a celebration, and so the bottom line is the act of lighting the menorah. So we want to bring the mitzvah to as many people as we can. There's a great opportunity because menorah is something that is expressed on the outside, which is unique, from mitzvahs, mostly mitzvahs, you put on your tefillin in shul and, or at home, so to speak, in the privacy of shul or home. Shabbos is celebrating the privacy of your home. Holidays are celebrating the privacy of your home or in synagogue, but it's not an outdoor affair. So on the one hand, it's an outdoor affair in the fact that we're bringing it, to the world. But the deeper message is this idea that we just spoke about. The simple message is light your menorah, celebrate the holiday. Now, once you've done the act of celebrating the holiday by lighting the menorah and, having a few latkes and sufganiyot and so on, learn about the holiday and understand a deeper meaning in the holiday, that it isn't merely, just have a bunch of latkes and have a party. Yeah, have the party. Celebrate life. What's celebrating life? What's your life? Your life is that you struggle. Your life is that you celebrate that you have a struggle, that you have a negative side to you, and that every time you win, that there's something to be joyous about. That is something to be celebrated. Is it defining you? No. So that's why you can celebrate it, because it's of celebrate the things you do. The greatest thing you could do is struggle in life. Meaning struggle between negative force within you and the positive force within you. The truth is, the less we struggle with those two forces, the less we're alive, the less we're living, because then we're just living on autopilot. We're not mindful. We're not aware. The more we're aware, the more we sense that there is a choice to the right and a choice to the left. The less we're aware, we just go down easy street. We just go down the easy path. Whatever is past the path of least resistance and the most pleasurable and least painful. That's how most of humanity will lead their lives. Here we're saying, no, that's not what the Chanukah message is. Yeah, there is a battle. The battle begins. Think about it for a moment. How did the Maccabees win? I mean, they, of course it was God's hand and God's blessings. It wasn't merely God's blessings. It was that they aligned themselves with God. That the battle for them was first inside of them. How they should align themselves with God to such a way so that now they can receive and transcend nature and allow God's power and vitality to bring the victory. But the victory is through them as they align themselves with God Almighty. So the same thing for us. We have a battle. The Hellenist is not outside. The Hellenist is inside of me. The one who just, wants to have a party, eat, drink, and be merry. And that's within me. When I align myself with the divine, I have to wage a battle in order to be able to do that. It doesn't come just like that. It doesn't come simply. That's not the nature of things. The nature of things is that, easy street. Listen, I'm only talking for myself. Maybe some of you don't know what I'm talking about, because you've transformed all the negativity and you're just
We hope.
I wish.
that makes sense. Is that clear?
Well, thank you. Thank you.
All right, folks. So I know now that. Give me the final I know now that. Sarah Malika, Larry.
I'll let my wife. It's a great holiday, and it has a lot of different aspects to it. I mean, that's why I asked the last question. Yes, we have to work on ourselves, but it's a time for celebration for all. And again, the more we can light up the world, the better.
Right. Absolutely.
And I know now that it starts with me, and then I light the menorah, or we light the menorah and spread the light to the outside world. But the light's got to start within me.
Well, that's the lesson here. That's the lesson we learned here. Exactly. By the way, there was once someone came by the Rebbe for dollars, and the Rebbe, it came from France, and the Rebbe asked him, "What is he doing for the campaign of putting on film with people?" And he said, "Rebbe, honestly, I don't always put on tefillin myself." So the Rebbe said, "So why should someone else lose out just because you don't always put on tefillin?" So sometimes, and in our generation, maybe in particular, is sometimes we got to go out and make sure another person's lighting a menorah, and that they are illuminating the world with their light of the menorah. And maybe they're getting the message, and I didn't even get the message yet to illuminate my life. But in the meantime, why should someone else lose out? So if we didn't reach to this level that we're battling, does that mean we should wait and not bring a menorah to another Jew to do the mitzvah? That we shouldn't bring the mitzvah, whatever mitzvah it is here, it's Chanukah, so the mitzvah of Chanukah to somebody else? Of course we should bring it. No doubt we should bring it. Even if I'm not myself illuminated in my life. Why should someone else lose out just because I'm not, fully illuminated with the message of Chanukah? So everybody, get an extra menorah, go around and find somebody who doesn't have menorah, light with them, allow them to illuminate their lives, and maybe they'll get the message faster than we will get the message. That's okay. You know what? Someone else got the message. That's a beautiful thing. All right, folks. I know now that Hanukkah is an amazing holiday, that we have 8 days that we can share with people, and that we should use it out as much as we can. By the way, tomorrow night we're having a wonderful celebration with Tommy Schnermacher here in catch it. Actually, it's on the same Zoom tomorrow night, 7:30. You don't want to miss it. Intriguing individual who came back to Yiddishkeit through Chabad, and I'll have an interesting story to share with us. So do join us tomorrow night. All right, folks. It's been a pleasure. A freilichen and lichtige Chanukah, a joyous and celebrated, illuminated Chanukah. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.
And everyone.
Amen.